to imagine all life as you know it stopping instantaneously and every molecule in your body exploding at the speed of light.
Total protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal.
Protonic reversal with your host, Conan Neutron. Broadcasting from a secret underground lair in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
A gigantic middle finger to everything that is rotten about music, rock and roll, and corporate power.
The thing is, though, if you don't laugh, you're going to go on a killing spree with sharpened nails.
Confidence of a hero or a fool. I wasn't exactly certain which.
Could not be more professional.
It means something. It means something.
You know, that's my take on it. What's yours?
Protonic reversal.
That's like a science thing, right?
Indeed it is. It is a science thing. It is a science place. It is a scientific fact that we are all up in your face. It is time, once again, for the one, the only Protonic Reversal. Welcome to it. Friday edition. Boy, are my podcasting arms tired. Now, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. But very excited for this episode. This is a very interesting fella who has been doing very interesting music for a very long time. And whether you realize it or not, you've probably heard at least some of the music. And that's kind of what I like to do here. And if you haven't figured it out, working on like year 11 of doing this, if you haven't figured it out, I don't know how long you've been with me, but that's my whole deal, if you will. So Danbert Nobacon, Chumbawamba, Axis of Dissent. I'm very excited for this. It's a cool record. You guys are gonna be stoked on this record. But before we do literally any of that, welcome to Conan Neutron's Protonic Reversal. I'm your host, Conan Neutron. I'm a rock and roll lifer who's been touring and recording for 24 years, most known for the band Conan Neutron, The Secret Friends. Music is a huge part of my life, and I use the format of this very long-running podcast to talk about music with musicians whose work I enjoy and respect, but who may not be household names. This is episode 386. Now, this is your first time listening to the show. Archives of it are available for free. No ads, no sponsors, no kidding, at protonicreversal.com. However, if you want to support the show and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/protonicreversal will achieve that goal. If you like the show, or even just a single episode, please feel free to like, subscribe on your platform of choice, share it around on the internet, or even leave a review. All that helps people discover the show, beats back the almighty algorithmic overlords, and it's just a darn nice thing to do. So cool. So tonight is Danbert, and fascinating fella for a number of reasons, not the least of which is that long career doing excellent music, yet known to many of the normies, we'll say, for one song. But I believe formed in 1982 and disbanded in 2012. So very long-lived band. And then also has been quite the troubadour, if you will, of the Billy Bragg school. I don't know if it's a school so much as like a club, maybe a loose association or affiliation of speaking truth to power. Some of the songs being very intimate, very folky, for lack of a better term, but informed by the political nature of punk and post-punk and that manner of thing. And then also kind of splitting the difference between the two. And that's a lot of the Axis of Dissent stuff. So again, very excited for this one because this guy's done a lot. So we'll I can't wait to have him on, talk about his latest thing here. This is Danbert. Danbert, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
Hi. Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm good. Great. Yeah, thanks for having me on.
I had this grandiose idea to give you this really overarching, spiraling narrative intro, and it's just gone. I'm too tired, man. I'm sorry. I can't do any of it.
That's okay.
It does strike me though that this new record that so it's Danbert, and the band is Axis of Dissent, right? Which I think is such a great name. That is it under the Axis of Dissent moniker?
Yeah. So that is basically an umbrella term for whatever musicians I can recruit to be on a record. So it varies from record to record. So I use a lot of the same people, but there's a lot of new people on this one.
And of course, it's I would presume that's a callback, homage, parody of the Axis of Evil.
Yes, exactly. Yeah,
right. Yeah, which of course, if you came up, when I came up, it's like, oh yeah, of course I know exactly. It's like when Jello called his band the Guantanamo School of Medicine. It's like,
yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
If you know anything about where Guantanamo Bay is, that's actually pretty funny.
Yeah,
and why it would be there. This is a crazy record. And by crazy, I mean it's very in depth. It's very thoughtful. There's a lot to it, and it's very dense. But it strikes me as something that if anyone's been just along the ride for the things that you've done, it's kind of straight down the line too. It's like, well, what else would you? When have you gone the easy path ever for anything?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of material, and there's a narrative thread that goes through all of this. There's recurring characters and themes. It's sort of it's like from the grand tradition of the concept record almost. Was that
So
the goal originally, or did it kind of end up being that way?
It kind of evolved that way. I mean, I did originally. I was just going to do a compilation album. Songs from some of my older records and add a few new songs.
Sure.
And it just grew into this beast. And the original compilation was going to be Global Warming's greatest hits. Because I've been writing about climate. I've been writing songs about climate for over 20 years, and there's more than enough songs for a compilation. But sure. I just started. Once I started that process, I just started writing new songs, and it turned into this whole other thing. And the kind of subplot with the robots, they feature on previous records as well, but it's a whole new kind of dimension.
Yeah, well, because there's kind of a narrative thread for them to a certain degree, almost, right? Which is, and we're saying this as. I believe Facebook just integrated an AI feature that like today.
I don't know. Yeah. Okay.
Which is where like the search for something was, and it's like, well, of course they did. Like, did you think that wasn't going to happen? Of course it is.
Yeah.
So it's just being foisted on the people. Always, at all times, and it just I'm thinking about how. I log into a popular image editing program a couple times a week, exclusively do stuff for this show, maybe every once in a while for like a flyer. Mm-hmm. But it started prompting to be like, did you want to use AI to complete your project? No, not really. I would rather not do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. But the near ubiquity at the time of this recording of AI in all things is prevalent and not a surprise to anyone, yet there is, like, within the record, kind of a narrative function of, like, how they interact with the rest of the world, for lack of a better term. And I thought that was kind of cool, because I don't think I've certainly not heard that on a record yet. So was that something where, okay, how did that come to pass? There we go. Try that.
So, basically the voices, it's all Google Translate. I just type in whatever I want to, and it's a painstaking process, but I just totally enjoy doing it, making the robots, give them a voice and a character and vocal inflections. You can use the punctuation or spaces to stretch out the words or whatever, and it just fascinates me. And then because AI is becoming, as you say, so ubiquitous in these past, it seems like every month it leaps forward another. I've always had this idea that, AI will be what we program it to, and because we live in a capitalist society, it's being programmed with capitalism. Or the Pentagon's AI is being programmed as killing machines.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way. AI can be helpful. Anyway, so the two robots develop autonomy, and we're not quite sure how that works. But they question capitalism because they haven't been programmed with it yet, and
Right.
they get beyond it. They get a jump ahead of it because it threatens them as well, basically.
Well, and it's something very explicitly mentioned in the record too. Like it's like it literally in the title of the record. Like it's I mean it surrounds us in all ways. So it makes sense, but it's very it's very there's no obliqueness to it all. Like it's very much of the Planet of the Apes style of naming for things, right? You know what you're getting into with the name.
Yeah.
You've been a man who writes very direct songs for many years. Is it something where are there too many prompts to go off of, or not enough? Or is it, like, do you find you have to invent ways to kind of make it more interesting for yourself, or not repeat yourself in the past?
Maybe a little bit. I could have gone in another direction in my life, and it would probably have been as an academic. When Chumbawamba was still a part-time operation, I went back to school and studied children's play for 2 years, the science of children's play, etc. And these days I find myself just reading non-fiction books, a lot about politics and history. And when when I started doing solo records again in 2000, when the electric band Chumbawamba ended in 2004 and my active performing role ended, I was going to try and write a book, and it was based on the Chumbawamba website. I actually had a page on the Chumbawamba website called The Axis of Dissent, and it was all about the ongoing aftermath of 9/11, the war on terror, the Iraq war, etc. And I realized pretty quickly that it's like quicksand. It moves so quickly. I don't know how people do write books, because the information just changes. So a lot of that work ended up being the album, The Library Book of the World, which came out in 2007 with the Pine Valley Cosmonauts. John Langford in Chicago produced it and plays on it. And that kind of set me back on the track of writing songs and playing and recording. And he maybe established a trend for me as a writer after Chumbawamba of kind of translating academic work on politics and history into song, which I don't know if many people do that. I'm not aware of them, but it just feels kind of natural for me to do it. I've just evolved that way of songwriting.
Right, because you have a certain way of interacting with the world, and you have your lived experience and your observations and conclusions and things along those lines, and you want to share it in such a way that's succeeds in being informative as well as entertaining, and works as a song as well.
Yeah.
I mean, is that accurate? Would you say?
Yeah, I think so. And interestingly, I kind of reacted against myself in 2016. I was recording, and it was actually a science album, the Stardust to Darwin stuff. I read a lot of books about evolution and human origins. I'm fascinated by, in particular, space and
Sure.
the idea of life beyond Earth, and I grew up on sci-fi, Planet of the Apes in particular. It's funny you mentioned that. I'm pre-Star Wars.
Yeah, it's one of it's so good. Like I'm lucky enough that I not only saw the movie, but I read the books like early on, and I was like, oh wow, this is pretty even back then I realized this is pretty crazy. Like this is kind of nuts,
Yeah.
And
anyway,
that goes to that Ray Bradbury, Philip K. Dick, all of these things that sort of like push the boundaries of popular culture into being like making it like a thought experiment. A lot of cases, like and maybe making people think a little more deeply about things that they never think about at all.
Yeah. And so I was writing this album, and I was finding that my lyric writing, like the academic side, it was getting infected by scientific language, which can be quite poetic.
Sure.
And we were supposed to be doing recording in October 2016, and we went over, and then the election happened. Trump gets elected, and I'm like, I can't not put something on the record about what is happening now.
Right.
So I added a couple of things to the record, and the record after that was during, we finished mixing it 2 weeks before the pandemic shutdown happened and so it's just all this stuff going on. I can't not comment on it in some way.
It would be disingenuous not to.
Yeah.
It's going to be the kind of thing where if you were to not mention it, then be like, well, why is he not talking about it? That's kind of weird that he's just avoiding it entirely. It's kind of strange. When did you move to the Cascades? When did you move to Washington? That's been a little while now at this point, right?
Oh yes, 2007 we moved here.
A little while, yeah. What drove that move? It's a beautiful area. First of all, I love that area of the world. But what drove the idea of not even just moving to the Pacific Northwest, but a relatively remote area of the Pacific Northwest? What drove that decision?
So basically, my partner, we were married at the time, and she moved to England, Laura, and she lived in England for 12 years, and we had twins there in 2000. And when my kind of active role was done in Chumbawamba, she was finishing off a postgraduate art degree in England. And she said, when that's done, I want to think about moving back to the US. And it was the first time I was free to be able to do something like that, unless I left the band or whatever. But
right.
And we'd visit the US pretty much once or twice a year, visiting her family and friends. And we were thinking about places to live, and her mom lived near Philadelphia, and we knew people there, and we thought about that. But she went to Evergreen College in Olympia.
Oh, Evergreen, sure.
Yeah, and she knew people in Twisp, which is where we are now. Evergreen people who moved to this part of the country to be organic farmers or fish biologists or whatever it was. So she knew people here, and she didn't want to be on the East Coast. And it's funnily enough, we had visited Twisp as tourists, and I just thought, how can anybody live there? It's beautiful, but how can anyone live there?
Nice place to visit.
It's 4 hours northeast of. Yeah, it's 4 hours away from Seattle.
Right.
But we just decided to try it, and we're both still here, and both. My daughter's living with me at the moment. My son's over on the west side, and I have a life here, I guess. I mean, it makes it. There is like a local art, music situation, theatre. I've been involved in local theatre for years, which also infects the record, the songwriting concept, kind of theatricality of it all.
There is there's very much a theatrical element to it that doesn't seem accidental to put it.
No. And we had that. Chumbawamba had that as well. You know, it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of an extension of that.
So do you feel that writing songs now versus writing songs like a full band environment where you have 6 to 8 people at some point
In the end, yeah.
that a lot of voices, a lot of ideas, a lot of noises, a lot of mixing decisions that need to be made, things along those lines. Working in this way now, do you feel that that's easier? Just to articulate the vision?
Well, it just allows me, in Chumbawamba, we kind of evolved roles pretty quickly. That we realized you couldn't have 8 people in the studio trying to mix a song, but a couple of people were better at it than others, and we then trust each other. So one of my roles was mostly as a lyric writer. I didn't really write tunes for Chumbawamba, but I'd always written tunes and done solo stuff. So I had an outlet for that anyway. So I just kind of, blended the two in the work I've done since. It's still a natural thing or an easy thing for me to put words to music, and something that I enjoy. And there's some inner motivation for me to do it periodically. So yeah, it's different. I have more control, but it's more difficult because I was never like the organizational person in the band. So organizing musicians to be in a studio it's a little bit stressful for me sometimes, but it's even a further leap to try and organize a band to play the songs like they are on the record, like a full band, because they're mostly in Seattle anyway. And I think it's also because we're all older, we have kids or full-time jobs or whatever it is. It's that I do play locally with the violin player on the record, and we do have a gig with some of the guys. We try and do it once a year over in Seattle. They've played on previous records. So we'll do like 3 or 4 songs, and I'll do some solo stuff. But yeah, it's different. I think it's just fits more with my stage of life or whatever.
Well, yeah. And you end up in a situation where you want to be creative. You want to express that creativity, and you want to do so in a way that's vital and interesting and pushes you forward. But then you're not sitting with the same people every week grinding it out necessarily as well. It's slightly different.
Yeah.
Do you find when's the first time you ever played in a more stripped down environment? Do you have more of a background in that before the band really took off, or is it something that you came to later in life?
Well, it's funny. When the band was taking off, I started doing solo stuff. So I had, for a little while, but I had both things going on. And then Chumbawamba kind of took over, and
right.
I probably still wrote the odd song here and there, or some of the songs, some of the lyrics I submitted to Chumbawamba that didn't turn in, that didn't fit with the tune or whatever. Maybe I rehashed some of those along the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did it a good chunk in the mid-'80s where I played solo. Just the acoustic guitar and voice, and that's how I mostly perform these days still.
Right. Do you find that's a good way to kind of get across the music? Do people generally respond pretty well to the more stripped down arrangements?
And also I get invited to shows where there's probably like 2 or 3 full bands on, so I'll go on in the middle somewhere and it breaks it up for the audience, and it's kind of cool, and people seem to like that.
Yeah, and then you end up in a situation where sometimes it can be difficult in a full band situation to have things get over, especially if there's like a message that you're trying to convey, right? And there's like a lot of other things grinding on sounding off, and you can get a little more immediacy for it, right?
I think so, and also I tend to talk a lot as well in between, tell stories, relating to the songs usually, or whatever's going on at that particular time, and that kind of adds another dimension to it.
Right. It's interesting to me that it's interesting you mentioned talking because one of my first points of knowledge about Chumbawamba beyond the big hit was the double CD, I think it was, with Noam Chomsky. I was like, there's a band that has a split with Noam Chomsky? Like, that's crazy.
I know, that? Yeah. And it was just because we knew I think it was it AK Press at the time?
AK Press, yeah.
And we knew the guy who'd set that up. He's since gone on to form PM Press, but they still put they still sell our CDs. I think the idea just came from them, and we're like, yeah, that's a great idea, and they put it all together, and we're like, yeah, cool, because we knew Chomsky and his work, so it seemed like a natural kind of match to us.
Yeah,
I don't know what he thought about it, yeah.
Thematically, it certainly worked, but again, I did not have a frame of reference for the catalog of the band, knowing that that's right down the line for what that band does, as far as like message wise. There's all this stuff discussing corporate structures, tyranny, and domestic surveillance, things along those lines. And it's then you. And you got some tunes too, and discussing similar themes and and it just struck me as like, I was like, it seemed insane to me. I'm like, wow, a band has a split with Noam Chomsky. That's cool. Who, by the way, one of the first people to ever email me back. To be fair, and like, it was to say that he couldn't do the thing I asked him to do, which was probably some zine. But he was very kind. Yeah. I was like, he didn't have to do that. That was very nice of him.
Yeah, that's cool.
So it gives you a lot of respect for the band there as well. But I also didn't realize, I was like, like at that point, because that's like what, 2000, 2001, something along those lines.
I think so. Yeah.
At that point, Chumbawamba had been going since I think it was 82, right? Like, that's deep into the catalog, deep into the career at that point.
Yeah, I'm just thinking it could have been earlier than that. It could have been late 90s. I don't know where it falls, because the big album was 97. I think it was before that, the Chomsky thing, but don't quote me on that.
Fair enough. Well, let's go back to the beginning. How did Chumbawamba even come to pass? Because first of all, I remember being like, there's a band called Chumbawamba, and I was like, that's a crazy name. What does that mean? That's like kind of the first thing that came to my attention. And then like later on, when I became more more music aware, if you will, then it was like, I was like, they're in the same line of like Crass and stuff like that. I'm like, what, really? Oh, okay, cool. And then I had no frame of reference or connection at all to the big hit song. I was like, did they steal that band's name? Like, what? Because I didn't know what you guys look like. Nobody knew what anyone looked like.
No.
Like, it was just, and it was like, okay, like is that the same band? Like, is this like a Butthole Surfers situation? Because that's a band I never thought was going to have a huge hit. I was like, the Butthole Surfers are the major hit. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And then they did. They had a huge hit. Yeah, that's okay. They let the weirdos in now and again, apparently. So coming back to those very early days, I know you did the whole Agitprop record label, but like even like before that, how did it all kind of come to pass? Because that's a very long-lived band. Bands are not by nature long-lived usually.
No, well, we had a very short-lived band prior to Chumbawamba, which existed in 1979, 1980, called Chimpeats Banana. And we were in our local northern town in England. We were just part of a pretty short-lived punk music scene, and we were like 25 miles from Manchester, so we'd go see the big bands that came, the punk band, the English punk bands.
Right.
And just, we were 16, 17, 18, and it was just what we lived for, music, and it was kind of, well, it was life-changing for me. I'd had this weird, fantasy about being in a band, maybe. But the music before punk, my older peers was like prog rock or pop rock, Genesis, Yes, ELP, and it was like you had to be who did a lot of concept albums. Who I just thought you had to be classically trained to be in a band. I don't know where I got this idea from. And then punk comes along and it's okay, just learn 3 chords and away you go.
Maybe two's probably fine.
It totally changed my life, and I've been doing it ever since. So we grew up same town, same high school or whatever, and once that band kind of died, Chimpits Banana, 3 of us went to the same college in Leeds, the biggest city. And all we wanted to do was go see bands and make songs, and we like hitchhiked to Paris to go play music in the streets, and we were doing like Clash covers and a few of our own songs, and it just was inevitable that we'd start another band, and that was when Chumbawamba started. And the first gig was in like 1982 in, and it just grew from there. So, and it was just before we were like kind of experimental. We were into like The Fall and ATV and bands like that.
Sure.
And then shortly after it started, Margaret Thatcher went to war with Argentina, the Falklands War, and that kind of politicized it. And we'd seen Crass before, but it suddenly electrified the whole. It just put it on a knife edge. Okay, this horrible shit is going on.
Yeah.
And that's when we started becoming more political, and we did go see Crass and played with a lot of the bands on the Crass label, and it became part of what is called the anarcho-punk scene in England, in Britain, which was early 80s, and that only lasted a few years.
Right.
And a lot of bands didn't really come out the other side, though they've since reformed, and we just kept going, we just kept going and kept evolving and acquiring more members and
right.
Yeah.
Changing it up. When did you, it's again, another selling point for me on Chumbawamba early on was that like, oh yeah, they hang out with the X. They do stuff with the X. Because I became a big The X fan. And then I was like, oh, I don't even know what these guys are up to, but it's great. And that seems like a natural pairing.
Yeah, totally. We put out our first 7-inch and they heard it on the John Peel radio show, the BBC late night kind of punk alternative show. And they said, oh, come do a tour with us. And we'd never played abroad other than playing in the streets in Paris.
Right.
And we're like, wow, this is exciting. And it was a match made in punk heaven, kind of. And we did a lot of tours with them. And playing in Europe just expanded our horizons dramatically.
Certainly, yeah.
To see how people operated over there, and
that there's a different way of even doing it, right?
Yeah.
Like, especially in the deep throes of Thatcher's England.
Yeah. And they had their own things going on, their own struggles or whatever, but
yeah,
we had a lot in common. And it was like Thatcher Reagan years, and later in the 80s, the Berlin Wall coming down, and like going and playing in like West Germany in Berlin when it was still an island inside East Germany, and it was a fascinating time to be able to, and it was pre the European Union, so every border we'd have to like, they had this document called a carnet, which you had to list every plectrum and every guitar string on it.
Yeah.
And sometimes we'd get stopped and taxed for trying to sneak in T-shirts or whatever it was.
Right. They toss the van and like go through everything. Yeah, it's the good old days, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so you're finding common cause with other bands, and you're getting out into the world. I mean, I think there was even was it Antidote, right? That was the
a split
collaboration.
There was, yeah, an EP.
Yeah, and did you find so in that time again going through these countries and whatever, like did that world expanding? What effect did it have on you musically? What effect did it have on you politically, personally? Like, it feels like that'd be very formative.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, politically, it was like, ironically, the first Intifada was going on, and the first we knew about it was when we were playing with the X, who were writing songs about it. In 1986, I believe. And the whole we played a lot in Germany and Holland, and once Eastern Europe opened up in Eastern Europe, and particularly in Germany and Holland, people squatted venues and had permanent venues that were kind of squatted, and to us it was kind of revolutionary. We did squat gigs in England, but they would only last for an evening.
Right.
You could take over a building and the cops would come and you'd kind of negotiate, okay, we're just here for like tonight and then we'll go, and they'd stay outside, and it usually worked, but you couldn't and we tried to, and people we knew set up like social centers, but they would get evicted within a few days, but
right.
In Europe they had them, and they had the power, I guess, to negotiate with the local authorities and even get money from the local authorities to keep the place going, because they'd find a building that was either the landlord had gone rogue and fled the country or whatever it was. They were clever and creative in ways that opened our eyes to what is possible.
Sure, and that's again, it's almost like a picture in time now, since it seems like there's not a lot of money in it these days. So maybe that's why that's why it doesn't happen so much. I do. So Pictures of Starving Children Sell Records. That was basically like like an answer to the various AIDS, the Band-Aid, the Live Aid, the the various aids was a very poorly constructed sentence, but what I'm speaking about is like the big benefits they would have ostensibly to help humanity, to aid this cause, that cause, et cetera, et cetera. They were ubiquitous around that time. They were all over the place. It seems like every week there was a new one. Cheeky. like a bit of a.
It's funny. We had the songs we were playing live, and we'd done a few cassette releases. I think a couple of cassette releases, and we had like an album's worth of songs. And we'd done 2 7-inches, and we're like, okay, it's time for an album. And then all that Live Aid thing happened, and we basically rewrote the lyrics to our entire live set and made it into the concept album that is Pictures of Starving Children.
Nice.
And that kind of established us as this weird book reading, nerdy,
right, hyper literate kind of, politically engaged, hyper literate, affair, if you will. And well, and like what's the first song is How to Get Your Band on TV, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a bold shot across the bow, if you will, right then and there.
Yeah.
So with that, and with the whole making a full length record and becoming on the coming into the world, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Did you feel like, okay, so we did that? What can we do now? What can we do next? What can we do? Or was it just like there's a natural progression of we're doing this now? Like, was there a thought process behind it?
I think there was a natural. I mean, we did think about it. We always, if we were doing an album, we'd always have a meeting about it first. What do we want to talk about, or how do we want to present it?
Sure.
Before actually writing any songs, usually. But it seemed like, each album we'd kind of make enough money to make another album. So it's like, every 2 years we'd make an album. We were doing playing quite a bit. Some years, not so much other years, not making any money from that. We all had part-time jobs or were in school for like the first 10 years of the band. And then, there was a point, I'd just turned 30 and I'd just finished my college thing, and I was doing interviews about going into like research programs. And it's like we had a band meeting. It's like, right, we've got to do this properly or just give up. So we have to give up our jobs. And we thought we tried it, and it took off. And we got an agent who was really good, and we were playing like 120 shows a year, mostly in Europe, and actually making a living from being in a band and taking it more seriously and having a great time. Yeah. So and we did that for 5 years before the big song. So we were like building up a following and a
slow build, right? Because because right after that, of course, you had Never Mind the Ballots, which is also a great parody of some other band. I think had an album called something along those lines.
Yeah.
Which of course wasn't that released like right around election time? That was the
1987 election, and we got in trouble with a lot of our lefty friends, because like we just. Now, I mean, I don't know. Now, we're in a similar situation, I guess, with Trump. It's like, I don't like Biden at all. I hate the genocide that's going on. I'm torn, but I'm sure Trump's going to be worse on all fronts. But at that time, we were like, no, we're anarchists, and we're the vote is kind of meaningless, and it was in some ways, but in other ways, it's just the weird political situations we have particularly in America and particularly in Britain, where it's just basically a 2-horse race, and there's not much daylight between them,
Yeah, and it's two heads on the same horse in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
To put it bluntly. And that's, there's a lot to be said there, and those are also different times too, and with different prescriptive solutions.
That's true, yeah.
Tell me about Slap, where I feel like that's where you kind of you kind of got into like more like sampling and things along those lines that creatively were.
Yeah, so there was various things going on. So definitely, the emergence of sampling and what's called in Britain dance music was kind of beginning to evolve, and also thematically as a band, we realized that we'd been doing like angry, shouty punk music, which was more pop than a lot of angry, shouty punk bands.
Sure,
but we also had a sense of humor and wanted to write things, positive stories about things ordinary people had done, rather than just being, oh, the government shit, this is shit, that's shit. Just try and express some positivity about the world. And Slap was kind of the first installment of that.
Yeah, and there was, I remember it was one of the main things. There was a big controversy about fair use, like a big negative land Casey Kasem U2 situation with that. I think there was a bit of a kerfuffle about some of the samples, some of the stuff on there, right?
No, so what happened was the next record, which ended up being called Shh. There was a version of it called So that came out in 1992, but when we were recording that in 1991, we had basically written these songs, and the choruses would be famous choruses to other people's songs, incorporated into our music.
Right.
I don't think we sampled them. We actually played them. And so the tune might be slightly different, or it might be the same tune, but then we'd have a different verse part.
There were parts.
So, for example, ABBA.
Sure.
Yeah. ABBA, Money, Money, Money. We had a song about people who counterfeited coins back in the 1700s in England.
Sure.
And anyway, so we deliver the nearly finished album to the distribution company who did the promotion on it, and they're like, "We can't put this out because we'll get sued. It won't be the band; it'll be us who get sued about it."
Right.
So the person there said, "Unless you get permission from all these artists." So we, in the days of a fax machine, we faxed all these requests off. And it was like,
ABBA, Kylie Minogue,
Michael Jackson, Paul McCartney. And they all came back and said either, no, you can't use it, or I want 95% of the royalties.
Right. Of course they do.
And the only person who gave permission, funny enough, I'm drinking my tea. I don't know if you viewers, this is Lenny Bruce. And his daughter gave us permission to use a sample of Lenny Bruce, the comedian.
That's awesome.
So he's actually on. Yeah. He's actually on the
one exception
album. Yeah. And the song's called Big Mouth Strikes Again, which is a chorus from a Smith song. Big Mouth Strikes Again is just a phrase that people use in England. So they couldn't claim copyright to the phrase. And we changed the tune anyway. So the album kind of became about censorship a bit and us championing, the right of people to acknowledge and use other people, because that's what folk music is. It's people taking a song and then adapting it, adding a verse here and there, and
making it your own.
So that, just evolving the cultural form, in a way, or changing it.
Was it true that you originally were going to call Jesus H. Christ?
Well, yeah, that's what and there is a bootleg of that.
It's one of my favorite
recording,
phrases,
and it's
by
called
the way.
Jesus H. Christ. Yeah.
I grew up secular humanist,
but
I love saying Jesus H. Christ. Jesus H. Christ. That's a fun thing to say.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we did too. Yeah.
All right, so after is Swinging with Raymond is the one that's after that, right? That's
no, Anarchy.
Sorry.
With
On Show Business, we kind of covered Show Business a little bit with the Chomsky thing, but that's right. So, which is I got the baby on the cover, right? So it's that one. I believe that's the one with Give the Anarchist a Cigarette and a Mouthful of Shit, right? If I remember correctly?
Yeah. 1994.
Yeah. Again, there's another. It's you guys kind of refining sort of the things that you do, and keeping a sharp edge on it. But tell me about that record. Tell me about, because that's an interesting time for music, and I say that because 1991, there was sort of like they let the freaks in for a hot minute. Like you can there's ways to circumvent the system, and then they immediately started to be like, well, why don't we just find our own alternative bands? And so that's kind of an interesting time for music because of that, because you have both those things happening concurrently of, hey, there's something happening and we don't understand it, but we want to profit on it, as well as an opportunity for actual cool, weird things to come in as well.
I think so. And so that album was the first that came. We just signed with a big independent label in Britain called One Little Indian, who interestingly was set up by a guy from the anarcho-punk scene.
Nice.
Derek. And it was our first album with them, and they had much better distribution and promotion, and we were, we were like a full-time band at this point, so we had more energy to promote a record and everything else, and so it kind of lifted us a level. And so we'd be getting played on the BBC daytime radio a little bit. We'd get into like the bottom end of the top 40 or whatever, but we were not a household name or anything. But we had a huge
Enough is Enough did pretty well, right? That was
we had a big live following. We was playing bigger tours in Britain and in Europe, and it felt like. And I think that was the first record we actually made money off.
Anarchy.
Because we were like, we got a check and we were like gobsmacked that we got
like,
a
what's
check
this?
for a record. So it seemed, like, this is what we do. We're all. I was in my early 30s. We were all in our early 30s, late 20s. And it's like, this is what we do. This is us.
So you have, so after that, there's the live LP, the show business that I think eventually is what ended up in the split, the split with Chomsky, if I remember right.
Yeah.
Right. And then you get into Swinging with Raymond, which is sort of Night of the Hunter.
That's right.
Hate and Love. One of my favorite movies of all time, by the way. Robert Mitchum, one of the best movie villains ever, if you ask me.
Yeah.
But the sort of the dual nature of man, silly hate songs, silly love songs kind of deal.
And it's funny. We were still touring and everything, but that was the first record that didn't sell twice the amount of the one prior to it. Right. And it was like, oh God, what's happening? We've put a foot wrong. Not that we were focused on sales. It just felt like that it didn't register somehow with the audience as much as we hoped it might, or something. I don't know.
Right. And that's the thing where, you think you're making, like, hey, we made this great record. Like, let's bring it around the world.
And we toured it and everything. And I think probably one of the songs, every album, like one or two songs would become like crowd favorites. But I don't know if there was one from that record. There might have been. Yeah.
So when does the situation change with the recordings for EMI? Like when does that come into the picture?
Okay, so it was a 3-album deal, and the third album we had recorded a lot of it or part of it, and we had a studio booked for the Monday morning, and Friday, late Friday, we get a phone call saying that One Little Indian have cancelled the recording studio. We don't know why or anything. Anyway, it transpires that they were having real financial problems. They have Björk on their record label still, so they obviously sorted it out. But I guess they hadn't paid their royalties for a couple of years, and it was like hundreds of thousands of... Anyway, they ended up sacking half the workers and half the bands. And we were on the list of bands to be sacked, but we got wind of it like a week or two earlier, and our management were clever, and we had a contract which allowed us to walk anyway, and we finished that record with our own money. And I went back to plastering, drywalling for a short period, and
Yeah.
And then we had this finished album, and our management passed it around, and somehow it's still a mystery. They'd managed bands since the 70s, like Hawkwind and Motorhead, Girls' School, bands like that. So they had connections, and that particular song was picked at the people they were passing the CD out to. People kept picking up on that song, and suddenly there was like a bidding war. Major labels were coming after us. Interestingly enough, not from Britain, they were from Germany and the US. Because
interesting.
The labels in Britain knew our political reputation and didn't really want to have anything to do with us.
Right, they may say something about the cops or something, like, who knows?
Yeah.
Wild cards.
So, and we just thought, we're not going to sign with a major label, but it persisted, and eventually, after many band meetings, we thought, well, we'll and there were various offers. We picked the best ones, one for Europe, one for North America, and we'll have a really good time for a year, and then we'll get dropped, and we'll just play with the whole opportunity of it. And it lasted a bit more than a year, but
right.
We did eventually get dropped because of the politics, basically.
Yeah. Well, I mean, remember there was like the politically incorrect thing, right? Like of the just steal it.
Yeah. And you quickly realize in that mainstream bubble, if you like, that there's certain rules, and we just kept breaking the rule, and you change the words on David Letterman, and they don't invite you back, and you gradually or pretty quickly burn all your bridges, and it's like, okay, well, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
also, I mean, the other factor was the song just had a life of its own. And, the record companies are like, okay, well, we'll put the second single out, and it gets like, I don't know, a 20th of the play that the song is still getting. The third single, even less. And so in the end, we can't compete against ourselves. And there comes a point where the record company like, okay, well, we just put everything onto the one song, and that's how a one-hit wonder is created, basically.
Right, because
they're just following the money.
It becomes like a black hole, the gravity sort of folds in and of itself to a certain degree. Well,
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, again, there was still something of a monoculture then. As well, but I mean that song was ubiquitous. It was everywhere. Third usage of that word.
Oh yeah,
the show, by the way, I don't use that often, but it really was everywhere, everywhere. And again, to reconcile the like, oh no, this is a band that like they're these anarcho-punks that toured the X and like made all these like audaciously titled records and songs that are calling out like it's like. Are those the same guys? Like what's happening here? So, but let's go back to the song that shall not be named. Go back to Tubthumping. How did that song come to pass? Mm-hmm. Like not just how the record came to pass, but how did that song come to pass?
Well, it was just part of our usual process, So we had a song. I don't know, the guitar player and somebody, and an idea for he had an idea for some lyrics. Well, no, we had some, like what happened with the first record. We'd sometimes substitute nonsense lyrics in until we'd come up with the proper lyrics, that fit in with the concept of the album. So One Little Indian heard the song, but it didn't have the words to the chorus on it, and they passed on it. They were like, and then Boff, the guitar player, he was at home in bed asleep with his awake in bed at night, and they heard a drunk coming up. They lived in a row house. They heard a drunk coming up the street, and it was the next door neighbor. And so Boff, he looks out the window, and the guy's there, totally drunk, singing "Danny Boy" as he's coming up the street, trying to get his key in the door, and he fell over.
Right.
And so he gets up and he tries again and he falls over again, and that's where the chorus comes from. And that was the last thing added to the song.
Right.
You know, and musically, we just thought, okay, it's a very upbeat song, and it'd be great to play it live. And we have other songs like that, like Mindful of Shit or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
But
it fits with
we
it.
didn't think it was anything out of the ordinary from our point of view until there was all the hype about it, you know.
Yeah, and what's funny, I wonder if that guy knows. Like, I wonder if that dude that was drunk knows. Hey, that's me.
Yeah.
Well, and it's something that seems to be notable that I found. I was talking about this with a friend the other day who had a whatever you would call what a hit on TikTok would be. I don't even understand what that would be necessarily, but she had a thing that became very popular that was unlike anything she normally does. That was just some goof off thing that she did, and of course, that's the thing that that like it's reached a larger audience, because the more nonsense and less pointed or related to actual topics or of concern, the better for quote unquote engagement metrics.
Yeah.
And in a way, that's just like the sci-fi future version of that. It's like, oh, this is like an empty vessel of a song for so many people that they can imbue whatever meaning they want into it, which is usually going to be something that, no, that isn't what we meant at all.
No, I mean, yeah, the amount of things or people who've used it, you know, who've applied it. I mean, sports, inevitably. But we had no idea about that when we wrote it. You know, we didn't think, oh, it's going to be on sports channels forever after.
Right, as a constant mainstay until the end of time.
Yeah, or you know, some guy doing his ballet routine to it, or you know, there was during the Iraq War, there was like the British forces radio playing it to the soldiers based in Iraq, and we're like, well, okay, it doesn't really apply if you get blown up with a landmine. You're not getting up again, probably.
You're probably,
but it was
not
really popular
again,
on there. It was really popular on their, you know, little in-house radio station in their encampment. And you can't figure for once a song becomes that popular, you can't control it, or you know,
it belongs to the world. Yeah, and that's
and it, to be fair, it's karma in a way, because you know, like I said, in the 90s, we when we changed kind of direction with Slap or whatever, and the following records, we embraced popular culture, and because we grew up with pop music, and we thought we want to be part of it, and so we got more than we ever could have expected, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange example of monoculture elevating a weird oblique thing at its least weird and least oblique. Right? And all of that deep catalog of music is right there if anybody wants to explore it and kind of find out more about it. But it almost kind of just, I think of a golem or something, right? Like it kind of takes on a life of its own and just does whatever it wants, really, to a certain degree.
Yeah.
How about
that's a good metaphor, actually.
Thank you. How about the rest of that record? I mean, was there an idea? Did it feel different at all? I guess with that record, did it just feel like, no, this is like the next thing we're doing?
No, we had an idea. You know, the songs are all the kind of idea was, okay, you know, we've lived in Leeds or northern towns all our lives, and it's just about what's going on in northern towns, and there's politics in it, but it's not like talking about you know, wars and foreign relation. You know, it was just more local, if you like. The whole approach of it was, okay, this is the lives we have and what's around us locally, you know, in a northern English city.
Yeah.
That was the idea behind it.
Now, was very aware, as someone who tries to stay aware of politics, even back then, with the John Prescott thing, who again he was made himself out to be some great, man of the sea, super macho dude, etc., whatever, and like totally selling out all the dock workers at the time, and
yeah.
It feels like there was a moment there. I'd like to hear your take on it.
Okay, so we just done this huge benefit gig for the Liverpool dock workers in London, and we were at probably the height of the popularity of that song, and so we made a lot of money for the dock workers and had these other bands on and had a dock worker speak and everything. And then we get invited to the Brit Awards, which is like the British equivalent of the Grammys. And we're like, no, we don't want to do that. And the record company, but it'll be so good for you if you do it. They'll give you all this money to make a special stage show and everything. And so eventually they twisted our arm. We had these friends who they were this activist group called Reclaim the Streets, and they were like people who on bicycles who, and it had a global warming kind of dimension to it. And so they made a film, and we projected the film behind us when we played, and we changed the words to the song when we did it for the recording. In the rehearsals, you just do it straight, and then you change it when they actually record it. But it still wasn't going. It still wasn't going out live. It was going out the next day.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're at this event, and we actually took a dock worker with us, and he was going to go up and get the award if we won. We didn't win, as it turned out. But him and his wife got put up in a fancy hotel in London, and everyone at the event, they serve you a meal, and they have these buckets by each table, which has the chilled wine and champagne in them.
Sure.
And they're huge buckets. And as the night progressed, and it must have been pretty late on, because Paul, the bass player, says, "Oh, John Prescott's on that table, over there." And we're like, "Oh, total typical Chumbawamba. What can we do?" And typical Chumbawamba, Danbert's the easiest one to convince of doing a dare.
And wind
and
him
it's
up.
Okay, we'll throw the bucket on. Yeah, so I go over and I grab this bucket and I jump on the table and throw it on him and say, "This is for the dock workers." And meanwhile, Alice and Paul are behind him with another bucket, and they've probably got more water on him than I did.
Right.
Because he physically pushed me off the table. I went flying. And then I'm scrabble away, and the security pounce on me, arrest me, and hold me for like an hour. And then the head of security, who would be like the top FBI guy, comes, and he's like, "Okay, we have to let you go because Mr. Prescott doesn't want to press charges, but we know you are, so your days are numbered," kind of thing.
Right.
And we just
keeping an eye on you, lad. Yeah.
We just thought, we've made a statement and it's cool. It's just what we do. And we go back to the hotel and spend another hour or two drinking and fall asleep. And then the next morning, the phone starts ringing, and there was no big story in the media the next day. And that was the big story.
Right.
And after about 3 hours, I'm answering the phone and I think, "Oh shit, I better tell my mum and dad because they're going to hear about
They're going to hear it either way, yeah."
And I called, I get hold of my mum, and the press had been on their doorstep at 7 a.m. that morning. And eventually talked the way in and looked at my old school photos and everything else and manipulated my mum and dad. And it was just all over the press for like a week. And, to be fair, we did put out statements, and some papers reported our side of the story, that it was a protest against John Prescott, whose department was responsible for dealing with the dock workers. And as you say, he has this image as a working class merchant seaman, which he was. But he's part of this new Blair government who are promising all this hope and change, but they're shafting the workers like Thatcher and Major did before them.
Yeah. Oh, man. and that's
So
and
that,
of course
that
the record label's like, that's not the kind of promotion we were looking for. I'm sure they were.
yeah, and then, they're like, and the detractors, the kind of right wing Rupert Murdoch newspapers, that, oh, it's just a publicity stunt, blah blah blah. And our record sales actually tanked in Britain the following week. But and our record company, like I said, we signed with EMI in Germany because EMI in England didn't want to touch us, and they had to take orders from Germany, which they really resented. So they're all like sending flowers to John Prescott's wife and apologizing, and trying to demand that we apologize, but we wouldn't apologize, and and it just gradually fades into the background as time moves on, but
Right.
kind of comes up every year when they have the Brit Awards, it seems like that, because
famous moments of
since
of
Jarvis
chaos.
Jarvis Cocker and Chumbawamba, and nobody's ever done anything controversial ever since.
Right, that was it. That was the top
think.
line of it. Yeah.
Yeah, and like I was saying, that is a classic example of us burning a bridge completely, because obviously they're never going to invite us back. And even the BBC for 2 or 3 years were like, well, we can't have Chumbawamba on, they're violent hooligans, which is how the kind of trash press described me as a 6-foot skinhead. I'm like 5'7". And and so we had this they tried to foist this image on us of we are troublemaker. We were always troublemakers in a sense that we rocked the boat, but trying to describe us as like violent, borderline terrorists,
right?
The
worst thing
is how they dismiss. Yeah, it's just a way of trying to dismiss what you're doing.
Yeah, well, and then that just becomes, you become a hate tulpa. You become something to have be batted around performatively for the entertainment of the masses, right?
Yeah.
Well, tell me about the follow-up to that, which is the What You See Is What You Get album.
Yeah.
I know a few things with that, not the least of which is I think before that, I think Nike offered money for Tubthumping, and that was obviously a non-starter. But you did take you let, what was it? Somebody used them, but then you donated all the money to like some NGO, right? Like some.
Yeah. So we had a couple of I think the first one was in Italy, and we were playing this huge squat gig, which we'd played for years. And we get a fax through saying Renault, the car company, wants to use the song. And we're like, no way,
Yeah.
And it was the first time we'd ever had an offer like that. And then somebody said, well, what happens if we take the money and then give it away? And
right.
So we asked the people in the venue, who we'd, like I said, we'd played there, and they had a pirate radio station. And we said, look, it wasn't a huge amount of money because it was just like a local Italian thing, but it was probably like, I don't know, $20,000.
Right.
And we said, well, if we do this and give you the $20,000, would you accept it, knowing it's coming from Renault?
Yeah.
And these are like hardline anarcho-communist squatters, and they're like, yeah, we would. That'll keep us going for 10 years.
Right.
And so we did it. And so there was a series of, and we could only do it for a certain, because the royalty money is always like 6 months behind or 12 months. So you kind of have to have the money in the bank to be able to give it to the people and not appear like you're just trying to rip people off or whatever. So we did it with a few things for probably like 2 or 3 years. We could manage to do that, where we'd give, and since we still, the song, it's usually that one song. We still get requests, and films, movies, fine.
Sure.
And occasionally it'll be in an advert, and we'll be like, okay, So for instance, my new record, the song got used at the Super Bowl. I don't know if it was 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and it was an insane amount of money. And it
So
was
you're talking about
QuickBooks.
the one that just came out, the Kochtopus's Garden record.
Yeah. So
Okay.
So I think it was an advert for MailChimp, and they were merging with QuickBooks or something.
Sure, of course.
And,
Yeah,
and
of course
so,
it was.
okay, I mean, we've used MailChimp or QuickBooks or whatever, and you know, it's
fine.
The song, it has a life of its own. Anyway, my share of that paid for the entire album, Kochtopus double album.
Oh wow!
Where I paid the musicians and
all
spent more money on it than any previous album. Yeah. And so I just feel like, okay, we're still signed to a corporate, publishing company, and that's where the royalties come from. And I've tried to say, look, I have these records I've done since Chumbawamba, and nothing. I don't hear anything.
They don't want to know from
They
there.
just kind of focus. Well, they just don't have the imagination. I think they can see that one song will raise revenue for them. So right. To me, I feel fine that I can take that money and put it into something worthwhile.
Fold it over into something interesting. Fold it over into something that can
good
in the world.
and it just happens that that this record is hyper political in an anti-corporate sense, but that wasn't the reason for taking that money. It's just that's just where my head was at the time when that happened to come in. And had that royalty payment not come, I don't know if it would have been a double album or not. Maybe it just gave me that little luxury to think, I can play around with the idea more than I normally would.
Right. Yeah, and you have the ability to. One, it buys you freedom, right? Which, as an artist, is what you're always looking for. To
yeah,
to be able to do the kind of things that you want to do. Passenger list for Doomed Flight 1721. Did you think that was a good idea to list off all the people that should die on your follow-up record to your big hits?
I don't. Yeah. It was usually very popular when we played it live, but
sure, yeah.
And we'd always change the names depending on where we were or who was in the news. But again, it's just that thing. We do our own thing, and it rubs up the wrong way, especially when you're in the mainstream corporate world, because they are very fragile rules, about what's acceptable and what's not, even though it's never stated. But it just became, even the guys at the record company would joke about it half seriously, because they'd know that it's kind of doing us commercial damage,
right?
But it's genuinely funny, at the same time.
Sure. I mean, look, Bono is about as self-serious as it comes. You think you're not going to get the piss taken out of you? Of course you are.
Yeah.
Oh, he's done so much good. Really? Has he? Okay, show it to me. Good for him. Doesn't mean if you're putting yourself up in as that much of a public figure. Look, it is what it is. So it becomes very clear, right, in the early 2000s, that there's probably not going to be hanging out too much with EMI in the future, right?
Yeah.
2001 or so is sort of...
Yeah, well, in America, it was Republic through Universal. And interestingly, to their credit, you talked about the ABCs of Anarchy. What the people who sampled U2, Negative Land.
Negative Land, yeah. Sorry,
so Negative Land, we played in Seattle. Yeah, me too. Negative Land, we played in Seattle on tour in, I think, 1998. And Negative Land came and they said, oh, look, we want to take one of your songs and do our thing with it. Because they had an admiration for what we did and we did for what they did. So we're like, fine, yeah. And then we're like, oh, shit, we're signed to a major, so we'll have to clear it with them because we're not supposed to record for other labels or whatever.
Right.
And so we took it to Universal and said, look, this is a really good thing. It's a great promotional tool.
Yeah, it's like one of the coolest things you could do.
It keeps our it keeps our credit. And they went with it and they let us do it. And it was like outside of our contract. I don't know if we had to write an extra little addendum to the contract, but they let us do it. So we were like, okay, that's cool.
Well, and that shows, again, writing that line of being in this larger commercial product world, but keeping it firmly with one foot ensconced in the world of, you're making art and you're challenging the listener and you're challenging your fans to kind of maybe dig a little deeper and go a little harder.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about, what was it? The boy bands have won.
Oh yeah. So basically, there was a whole series of albums after Tubthumping, WYSIWYG, and then, and
there was a folky one, right? There's a bunch of different ones.
Yeah. And we were in a position where we could just artistically, we could kind of do what we wanted. And even when the major labels dropped us, because we were making money from royalties, we could go away and set up our own label again, which we did. And then, the one step in the way which we've missed in the late 80s, we did a 10-inch called English Rebel Songs, which was just a cappella folk songs. And that was also in reaction to us perceiving ourselves as a loud, shouty, angry punk band. Right. And we're like, oh, there's all this history of, people using folk music to express working class ideas. And so in the 2000s, we always had a couple of a cappella songs in the set. And then we did Ready Mage, which used samples of old English folk songs, which mostly we didn't have to, they were like public domain.
Right.
We got permission for the ones and everything, and paid for whatever we used, but as a result of that, the a cappella thing and the folk connection, we started getting invited to play at folk festivals. And also, after Tubthumping, we all had, none of us had children, and within 4 years, there were 8 children to people in the band. Oh, wow. So that changed the way we did things.
Sure.
And we mostly just played... Yeah, we mostly just played festivals in summer. So like playing folk festivals, we're like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah.
And we did a re-release of English Rebels. We redid it. And so we had this, the 3 people in the band, the 4 people actually, were who were really good at doing the a cappella stuff. There was events where they just wanted the a cappella thing, so they did it, as an experiment. And by 2004, we did one full album again, toured it properly in Europe. Yeah. And after that, we had a meeting and said, look, we've kind of come to the end of the road, but the folk thing, the people who did the folk thing carried on and made 3 or 4 albums, one of which is the boys bands I've won,
right?
Which I think is in the Guinness Book of Records, because the actual title is a whole paragraph.
Oh, is it? Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. Yeah. It's got a whole.
It's in the Guinness Book of Records for the longest album title.
I guess. Hey, it's good to be in that Guinness Book of Records for something, right?
Yeah. That's it. And we still operate as an entity, like we're trying to re-release some of the old albums at the moment, and we're always getting interviews and archive questions, and as a business it still functions because of the royalties.
Sure.
So Chumbawamba is still a thing, but we just don't play live. We did the last one where we were all there was in 2012. we did a big show in Leeds, which was the 30th anniversary, but we haven't done it since then.
But you're still involved with some musicians. I mean, a couple of them, the rhythm sections on
funnily
the
enough,
record, right?
That's right. 2 of them are on like 8 of the songs. Harry and Neil, drums and bass. And that was really fun actually, because we hadn't done that. I hadn't done it since 2004. You know, with other Chumba guys. Yeah. So,
how are you putting together songs now? Like, are you a someone that does a lot of demoing? You know, and how do you make that happen? How do you work with lyrics? Because it's the record, much like a lot of your stuff, is very lyrical. But that
it is, that's
nowhere.
kind of my kink is the kind of wordy, lyrical.
Yeah.
It's pretty much the same as I was on. Either just with an acoustic guitar, I'll come up with a tune and maybe just have an idea for like a sentence and just build it from there. Sometimes, occasionally now on piano, I'll do it. But mostly just acoustic guitar. It's just me, and I'll, plug away at it. And then there's usually like an evolution. Some songs come really quick, and others I'm just forever rewriting the words, trying to make them fit better or make sense more or flow better. But it's a simple age-old process, And then basically I'll just record myself playing guitar, singing, and I'll give it to the musicians and give them the opportunity to do whatever they think. And then we go in the studio, and Mel, who is the engineer, she's also the producer, because my ears are absolutely... I was never great in the studio, but, I wear hearing aids, and,
right.
She has
lifetime
an amazing
of playing
ear.
loud music, and, it takes its toll, for sure.
Yeah, and she has great ideas in the studio, and so me and Mel together, we kind of, bring musicians in, and if they listen to on this record, some of them just came in, and like the guitar player, I think he'd heard some of the stuff, but some of the other stuff, he just was in the studio and came up with the his parts or whatever. So it's I go in and with a bass player and a drummer, and I do a rough acoustic guitar and vocal, and that's the guide, and then we just build on that, and it's a much slower process, and you could argue it's less organic because it's not a live band in the studio, but it's just the way at this time in my life how I can actually do it, I think.
And do what you did. I mean, double record, right? Like it's sort of it's
yeah. And then all the robot bits I just kind of record at home, and
sure.
Mostly the music as well. I just have a keyboard, and I'll do the parts on a keyboard and find some drum track, and some, we had some live stuff, some live played stuff too, but mostly it's just me noodling away.
Well, and it's one of the few albums I've heard that explicitly states that one of the reasons why nobody does anything about climate change is because people are making money on the way that things are in a song. I've heard people say that, but not in a catchy song.
Yeah.
I mean, do you feel that that's and that's just one of the things that are in there? Just basically, it's not even. I feel like a lot of times when artists will attempt to tackle serious subjects, they'll attempt to be more oblique or not as direct. And these are very direct songs about which you have a history of, to be sure.
Yeah, I just think there's a tradition of it, and it's frowned upon, because it's like, well, pop music's supposed to be light and fluffy, or it's all about the sound and the words don't really matter, but there's a whole tradition that's in folk music and even in musicals to a limited extent.
Right.
I've never actually seen Les Miserables, but
No, nor have
that's
I.
set in the French Revolution. Yeah.
Right.
So you think, oh well, and we've done, I worked.
Why'd you
in
have to
the
make it
local high school
political?
doing, yeah, I worked in the high school doing theatre, teaching theatre
Right.
for like 9 years here in Twisp. So that also, and we usually do the musical every year. And there are, I mean, it's usually boy meets girl across the tracks, love story, but then the subplot has some, like the Crybaby we did and Heathers.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
there's,
right.
there's
Heather's is a
some
musical now. I
texture.
forget about that. Yeah.
Yeah. There's some texture in the subplot. There's some interesting kind of little things in there. So I just put it full up front and in your face, really.
Do you have a favorite song on the record that's sort of like, wow, I hope people, kind of engage with this one, that one I'm really proud of, or
yeah, I think when push comes to shove is that was the first single, the weird world today where you put singles out and they go on Spotify or whatever and everywhere else.
Now it's a thing you can click on the internet.
And that's probably the one. Yeah.
That's how when push comes to shove.
Yeah. And it's more of an uplifting, universal kind of thing. So I kind of like that one. I like the opening song, Fun Change. And a lot of them, really, but it's hard for me to pick. I'm so attached to it,
Well, there's so many
immersed in it. Or I am.
There's like 24
that is
children.
True. There's too many of them. 24. Yeah. But I also on this one, I
oh, go ahead, please.
The singer Miranda, she does Planet Care for All, which is also I think I would love for her to just make a video and just put it out there. I've got to ask her about that, but and she has such a great voice, and she's learned to accommodate my English eccentricities in my voice, so that when we sing together, she kind of blends in with me.
Oh, it sounds lovely. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
it's definitely one of the ones that I singled out.
Yeah, there's some tunes on there which I think go beyond just like okay, it's politics,
Yeah.
I think some of the stuff.
You got authoritarianism. You got capitalism.
Could have appeal.
you have all the isms.
Yeah,
all the isms are here.
Yeah,
but it's also not.
But
just
I also,
thing.
No, and I still, and I probably always will, when I make a record, I just think in terms of an album. It's a group of songs that are connected. Yeah. And I know that's not how a lot of people consume music these days, because it's just, you click on a song and you don't know its history or where it's from, and it's just a song, and that's how it's on a playlist or whatever. Right. But I think a lot of the songs work in that way as well. If you just heard him in isolation, you'd think, oh, this is interesting, or maybe.
Yeah, what's this new reggae band I found? I like this reggae song I just heard.
Yeah.
No, but I think it's important to think about how people engage with music on the level that they engage with, not necessarily how you would like to have them engage with. And some people I like it. I think it flows very well as a record. I'm definitely very much a listen to the record kind of guy.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
And I think it flows very well. And I think there's a lot of fantastic ideas in it. There's a lot of, like I said, there's a pretty cool, interesting narrative, and it's enough to keep you engaged, even if that isn't maybe your main thing that you're like looking for in a record. Yeah, there's always a chance when you get something that big that's like, oh, it's so sprawling, why don't you just cut it down and make like a single record out of it? But I actually think it kind of justifies the runtime. I mean, and that's what I want.
Yeah.
Do you think that like what do you think about for like live presentations of the Kochtopus's garden, which I should mention. It's like it's the Cox or Cokes as they prefer to call themselves. Spelling
the Koch,
they
Koch
prefer
brothers,
to pronounce it that way
the
because
remaining
the brother. Yeah,
yeah.
The one of them's just like not as political as the other one. Yeah, but one of them died, which shows that maybe there is a God. Who knows?
Yeah,
but
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for the live, like presenting these songs live, because some of them are like, it seems like would work very well in a stripped down situation, and some of them kind of seems like, oh, this you need more musicians to kind of get the feel.
Yeah, and I would love to do that at some point. And I call it a musical in the title, and I could, I've written a couple of plays that are, and we performed them with the high school, and I call them plays with songs rather than musicals. And I could adapt it, and some of the songs off the earlier record are part of the same story, really. And do it that way. I would love to do that at some point.
It seems like it would lend itself well for it. I mean,
yeah, or ideally have a 5 or a 6 piece band and do it like it is, or similar to how it is on the record. But as I say, that is a stretch for me these days. I don't know why.
It's a lot of work.
Not. Yeah, yeah.
I'm exhausted just hearing you talk about
previous
it.
Record. The previous record, the 2021 Mesmerica, I had a local drummer and a bass player, and I wanted them to be on this record. So I went to them in the beginning, and the bass player was going through a divorce and one thing and another. And then we were coming out of the pandemic, and it just didn't work out for various reasons. And partly me and partly what everyone else was going through.
Yeah.
So
kind of a heavy time.
We'll see. I mean, I know I do have shows booked where it's just me or me and the fiddle player, and the way I compensate live is I tell stories in I put it in context, usually in a humorous way. There's a lot of humor in there on the record, I think, as well.
Oh, sure, absolutely. It's attacking very serious subjects in a sort of irreverent way to
and that's
capture
very
the attention.
Very Chumbawamba-esque, really, in lots of ways.
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Any plans to get like further out, beyond the Cascades?
So I mean, I'm doing a little at the end when the record comes out. I'm going to local radio in Olympia and Portland and playing in Seattle. And then again at the end of the month in Seattle. And then in July, I'm going to England. And I have like an 11-date tour there. Yeah. So, nice. My plan is just the whole of the year, especially up to the election, to try and play more, maybe, along the West Coast and maybe get over to the East Coast. But we'll see.
Well, I mean, there's salient topics being addressed in the record. And it occurs to me that you get in front of the right audience, it could really go over for people that don't know what Chumbawamba is and don't care. Which is that's something to be said for art that can engage beyond the context of the artist itself. So Danbert, this has been great, man. Thank you so much for doing the show, and it's been great having you. Last thing I ever ask people, it's the only canned question I ever ask on this show, and so you can choose to interpret this however you like.
Okay.
But why do you do what you do?
Why? I think it's just something in me. People talk about, I'm not one of those people who think art is like, it takes precedence over everything else in your life, so you can get away with abysmal behavior just because you're an artist. I don't believe that, but I do believe there is an inner driving force. And like I said, I studied children's play, and I think that's where it comes from. And a lot of, I think most of us have that when we're like 6 or 7 years old and we're running around making up crazy scenarios or making up songs. But a lot of us are encouraged to forget it or bury it. And punk rock just gave me the opportunity to just carry on doing it. And I'll be forever thankful for that.
Fantastic.
Danbert Nobacon, carry on playing.
Thank you so much for being on the show, man. It's been a pleasure. Record's great. I hope people will check it out. I'll include in the show notes all that stuff that I try to do in this show. And yeah, hope
Brilliant.
to see you
well,
play.
Thanks so much, Conan. I appreciate it. Yeah, where are you based?
I live in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I'm from Oakland, California, though. I'm a Bay Area guy.
Okay.
Heart. So I'm frequently back.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'll make it happen one of these days. I'm like a pop up where you least expect it. So.
Yeah. Cool.
All right. Take care, brother.
You too. Thanks so much.
All right,
take care. Bye.
There goes Danbert Nobacon. We're gonna hear a song off of the new record. We're gonna hear. Actually, let's see the single. When push comes to shove. Here we go.
It's an emergency for shambling democracy that never quite was, but still could be.
As Albert Einstein said, we can't solve our problems with the same thinking that was used to create them. As Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. Never did, never will, so here are our demands. It's not rocket science, it's really quite simple to love who we want, to have some room to breathe. Some democracy in the workplace, some democracy in our paychecks, some health and well-being for the planet and for all. So this is a love song from the bottom up. We're done being pushed. Enough is enough, and there are more than enough of us for this push and shove. With love, push, shove. From the working class, with love, push, shove. As Percy B. Shelley said, rise like lions, shake your change, ye a many day of view. As Harriet Tubman said, don't ever stop, keep on going. If you want to taste freedom, keep on going. It's not rocket science, it's really quite simple to love who we want, to have some room to breathe. Some democracy in the workplace, some democracy in our paychecks, some health and well-being for the planet and for all. So this is a love song from the bottom up. We're done being pushed. Enough is enough, and there are more than enough of us for this push and shove. With love, push, shove. From the working class, with love, push, shove. crack. The billionaires will have to give it all back, and now the system has started to crack. The billionaires will have to give it all back. Give them a piece of your peace of mind. Tell them love from people kind. Give them a piece of your peace of mind. Tell them love, cause this is a love song. From the bottom up, we're done being pushed. Enough is enough, and there are more than enough of us for this push and shove. With love, push, shove, from the working class. With love, push, shove, the precariat. With love, push, shove, the underdogs. With love, push, shove, all of the entrapped. A little bit of movement, make that wiggle room, make way for humanity coming through. For the many, not the few, that would be me and you.
There you go. That is Danbert Nobacon and the Axis of Dissent. When push comes to shove, get a little dance hall on your ass. That's off the Kochtopus's Garden, or Kochtopus, if you prefer. Now that's what I call Capitalism, the musical. You can find that all over the internet. And after May Day, you can get the whole double LP, and it is quite impressive. I'd like to thank Danbert Nobacon for being on the show. Great deep dive into a great career. Please go find him on the internet. I believe it's danbertnobacon.com, if I remember correctly. All the amazing things that he's up to. Keeping at it, keeping vital. Name of the show is Conan, Neutron, Protonic, Reversal. Thanks very much for listening to it. The show airs usually Thursdays, 8 Eastern, 7 Central, 6 Mountain, 5 Pacific. Streaming on YouTube and Twitch. Podcasted later everywhere. No ads, no sponsors. No kidding.
Mr. and Mrs. America and all the ships at sea.
ProtonicReversal.com for the archives. But if you like the show and you want to help it along and get episodes sooner, $1 a month at patreon.com/ProtonicReversal gladly achieves that goal.
50,000 watts of power.
Thanks everyone for liking, sharing the episode, subscribing to your platform of choice. All that helps people discover the show. It's a darn nice thing to do. So really appreciated. Beats back the algorithm where we all live.
This microphone turns
Donnie Blair of Toadies and Hagfish on Monday, and then the 10th anniversary show on Thursday. So stay tuned. A bunch of good stuff coming up. Stay safe out there.
Out on Route 128, in the dark and
check you
lonely.
later.
I got my radio on. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? if you're the fifth caller, or any caller at all, welcome to my top 10. I'd like to thank our sponsor. But we haven't got a sponsor. Not if you were the last man on earth. She was prepared to prove it. This one goes out to a special girl. No special girl. It's the end of radio. The last announcer plays the last record. The last what? Leaves the transmitter. Circles the globe in search of a listener. Can you hear me now? Really broadcasting if there's no one there to receive. It's the end of radio. As we come to the close of our broadcast day, radio. Can you hear me now? This is a test! If this had been a real emergency,